So kind of my goal for today and this coming Thursday is just to finish up these kind of introduction to theories type of lecture. Um, the one that we're going to go over today is Jean Piaget's cognitive developmental model. And um, then on Thursday, we will do Eric Erickson's social emotional model. And again, the idea behind these introductory theories, because there's several more that we can also go over, and that I'll actually have you look up in your textbooks a little later, is just to kind of get your mind thinking about how we develop and think and emote over time. None of these theories are like 100% proven or anything like that, but they give us a framework. And then next Tuesday, we can start right in on infancy, starting with physical development. Okay. So, Jean Piaget is recognized. So Freud kind of developed his theory, and he did it from just pure observation of how children develop through the notes he took from working with his clients and looking at their childhood and all of those things. So it was very much an observation type of thing. Piaget, on the other hand, is going to introduce the idea of experimentation to see if children are developing cognitively over time. And we'll see some examples that he came up with as we go through his developmental um, theory. But the basis of Piaget's theory comes to kind of three terms and the importance of the interaction between the child and the world. But unlike, I think, a lot of parenting techniques of modern time and stuff like that, is Piaget strongly believed that stress is important for children to develop, that they need to be put in uncomfortable situations in order to uh, grow and develop cognitively, and that it's the job of the parent to make sure they navigate through that safely without getting hurt or harmed or come to an understanding of it. So the first concept for Piaget is the child's exploration in the world is important, and mistakes are paramount in order to grow and develop. Okay. And he believed that I'm going to go down to this term on the bottom. He believed that we kind of make mental frameworks in order for us to easily negotiate our world. And he called these mental frameworks schemas. And what a schema is your best generalization of something. Okay. So the best example I think is a dog. A schema for a dog might be has four legs, is furry, and barks. This is important because, as you all know, there's different sizes of dogs. There's different shapes. There's different, and if we were to try and categorize the difference between, say, a Shih Tzu and a Pit Bull, and try to remember that they're and think of them as two separate type of beings, our world would become completely overwhelmed. We wouldn't be able to navigate our world if we saw each individual thing as an individual thing. We have to put things in general mental setups. Okay. And yes, of course, schemas can go wrong. If we were talking, for example, in social psychology, we could talk about what's known as the ultimate attribution error, where we see more diversity. Our schema is more diverse for people like us, but is more tight, more in exclusive, less diversity for people who are not like us. So, for example, if you're a white European, you think that white Europeans, there's more diversity and ways of thought in that group. But then if you look at maybe someone like who's African American, you assume that all African American men and all African American women are the same. They all have the same attitudes, beliefs, and ideas. And so schemas, while they do help us generally, they can lead to um, um, biases in our thoughts. And if we were to think about this, a schema is the basis of prejudice, if we want to kind of put it that way. But in the general of life, it's kind of one of those necessary things to make it easy to navigate our world. Piaget believed that we develop schemas through what he called assimilation and accommodation. Okay. Assimilation is interpreting new information using knowledge or a schema that we have already developed. Okay. So, for example, a child calls a zebra a horse because it fits an existing animal schema. It is horse-like, it has the mane, four legs, all of those kinds of things that fit at that time with the schema of a horse. Okay. And then accommodation is modifying existing schemas to incorporate new information. So child learns that a zebra is different from a horse and updates their animal schema. So they separate those once they take a kind of a closer look and see that there's a difference between the two. Okay. If we look at kind of a literal example, we can talk about baby feeding, right? Baby usually starts through suckling, either a bottle or mom's breast and whatnot, and that's their interpretation of how to drink. And we'll use that term, okay? But then let's say you introduce a cup, all right? The infant doesn't instantly assimilate the cup as a drinking device because it's too different. So it has to accommodate it. And if you ever watch an infant with a cup, it often becomes a drum, a throwing object, or something you put in your mouth and you try and figure out what it is. It takes them a while of repeated exposure and liquid being put in it, and mom and dad providing examples to assimilate a cup into a drinking object like a bottle. Okay. So in that case, you start with accommodation, new object, don't know what to do with it. So I make it into a drum, a biting toy, or a throwing toy. And then over repeated exposure, I assimilate it to a drinking device like a bottle. And that's kind of how assimilation and accommodation work to create our knowledge of what a schema is. Okay. Now, through this assimilation, accommodation, and develop of schemas, Piaget believed that we go through different stages of developing our understanding of the world. Okay. Um, in the first phase, we'll kind of go over these. In the first phase, he called the sensory motor phase. Okay. And in this sensory motor phase, Piaget believed that what the infant's kind of job is to understand themselves in physical space. So one of the first things need to learn is how to physically interact with objects. So they learn how they can take their arm, extend it, grab a bottle, put it to their mouth, and this integration between what I'm seeing and I can interact with it is really what this first stage, according to Piaget, is really about. Um, we will learn when we get to infancy that infants are much more than a sensory motor machine. They actually are very complex. And I'll just give you an example of this because I don't like this first notion that this is all that infants are. And so I'm going to put this out here right now is that infants are much more complex than we think they are. Okay. If you bet, do that online betting and stuff like that, and you want the better probability of winning that bet, I would go put the two objects that you're betting for in front of an infant and let them choose because they are better at statistics and probability than most statisticians. What we usually get with a coin flip, they get with higher accuracy than we do. But unfortunately, when we get language and all that kind of stuff, we beat that out of them and scare the hell out of them about math and solving problems and probability. But we are actually finding that they have a very complex mathematical ability that even exceeds some grown adults. So I just wanted to say that because, and we'll have other examples next week when we talk about it, that infants are not just these blank minds that are wandering around the world trying to figure out how to walk around. But we'll leave that information for the infant stage. But going back to Piaget's, is what he believed that the feat that he noticed that usually occurred around the 2 years of age that kind of changed from sensory motor to what we're going to call the pre-operational phase is the ability of a child to solve what are called permanent object problems. Okay. And a permanent object problem, and I don't know if it's best represented in the slide right here, is the understanding that objects continue to exist even when they cannot be seen. Okay. And so let's go with this Piaget idea. What Piaget used to do is he put up a curtain or like a little blanket like this and whatnot in front of a child, and he would have the child's usually favorite toy, like a stuffed teddy bear. Okay. In the curtain example, he would take the teddy bear in front of the infant and put it behind the curtain, and then either non-verbally or verbally, depending on where the child was with language, would basically ask the child, where did the teddy bear go? Okay. In the example here from Science Source, sometimes he would just simply have the teddy bear and just put the blanket over it and then would see if the infant would search for it under the blanket. And that's maybe a more simple example. And what he found is that the children, I'll kind of put it this way. Piaget, if the child was 24 months or younger, and Piaget would kind of ask the child, where's the teddy bear? Verbally and non-verbally, the child would go, what teddy bear? What are you talking about? There's no teddy bear here, dude. Okay. Um, assuming infants have adult language. After 24 months, uh, they would basically go, you idiot, it's right there. It's just, you just set it right behind this curtain. Duh, kind of thing. And they would search for it and find it. Um, And so, what Piaget theorized is at the moment a child gets object permanence, is when a child is able to hold things in their mental life and mentalize things as they exist. Okay. Um, and we're not, we will kind of review in the textbook some other theories, such as the Montessori theory of child development, and I'll provide some pages to read. Sorry, I'll provide some textbook pages to read some of these other theories. But one of the things that the Montessori idea says is that we should promote things like object permanence and help children understand these things. And so in this case, this is what this little box up here helps a child understand. So he's put the ball in the top, and it basically takes a minute, and then it appears again. And what it's trying to show is that the object still exists, even though it might be going through something they can't see. So there are situations where we promote developing these things. Now, again, I'm giving Piaget's theory as he originally said it. Um, um, what was I just trying to say? uh, as he originally did it. But again, when we get to the infant section next week, we will find that infants actually develop theory of mind much younger than 24 months of age. But we'll go with what Piaget originally theorized for right now. All right, so what's happening in the pre-operational phase? Well, if we were talking about the age of 2 to 7, what I think maybe is the most significant thing that children have is between the age of 2 to 7, we learn anywhere between 30 to 70,000 words. And I don't know about you guys, and I don't know even 30,000. I maybe know 1,000. um, but children have this amazing retention of word development. And then after the age of 6 and 7, we start trimming off the words we don't commonly use. And we put other things into categories and all those kinds of things. So, like I said, by the time you're my age, you went from 30 to 60,000 down to maybe I don't know. But we have this incredible capacity, if you think of what a word is, to symbolize our world. And the pre-operational phase, according to Piaget, is all about creating symbols for the things that exist in our world, giving them words and labels. Hence, for those who are going into early childhood or those who have a child in childcare, one of the first things they recommend looking for when you go visit a child care is whether they've labeled everything. And they have labels for, they even have a label and they put the word chair on it. They have a label for counter and they put counter. And because they want to help the child, again, this is promoting this developmental phase. They want to help the child in understanding the proper symbols for given objects. Okay. And also connecting it with its written version, verbal version, all that kind of stuff. So now, because this is an overwhelming capacity in the first place, and because it seems like the world is coming to them, this age group is marked by egocentrism and centration, meaning the world exists for me. Um, and my needs are the most important needs. Okay. And there's going to be two periods in our life when we're the most egocentric. The first one is during this period, the developmental period between the age of 2 and 6. And the second one is going to be during adolescence, when we're going from childhood into adulthood. We then also become very egocentric. Okay. In that phase, though, when we get to that on Thursday with Erickson's theory, we'll talk about egocentrism in the development of an individual's identity and who they are as an individual. What is really promoting it in this early childhood age is one, they have caretakers that are constantly feeding them information and feeding them literally. And it seems like all the attention is going to me, and also the cognitive ability, because of all the symbolization and everything that's being learned, it's hard to reflect back outwardly and reflect on how others are feeling and thinking and doing, even though we do that, which we'll get to again later on. Okay. All right. So that's that marked period of sensory development. It's really about symbolization. But again, once we get to that 30 to 60,000 word mark, things are very difficult to deal with. If we think about uh, how many names an individual can remember, it's anywhere between 50 to up to 100 is the total individual names that we will be able to remember when we look at someone and we go, "Oh, you are this person." And so, you know, we can't take everyone as an individual and remember everyone's name. So in this example, we start to put things into categories to try and simplify our world. And this is where we solidify things like our um, schemas of and what people are and what people are not, what objects are not, and whatnot. But what did Piaget find that was marked between this transition of what he called concrete operational versus pre-operational, which is building those symbols and words for things? Well, he felt we have to be able to do a couple things that are known as conservation tasks and mental rotation tasks. Okay. So, what's known as a conservation task is represented by this figure right here. So, in a conservation task, we have two beakers that are the same size and shape. And then we have a third beaker that might be tall and skinny, like this one is in our figure, or it might be shorter and rounder and whatnot. And in the first one, we fill the first two same beakers with the same amount of liquid. And we ask the child, is this the same or are they different? And of course, most, even before the age of 6 and 7, they all, well, it's the same. Okay. And then in front of the child, we take maybe beaker B and pour it into beaker C. And then we ask the child again, is there the same amount or is it different? Okay. And children above the ages 6 and 7 started to recognize that it's still the same amount, it's just in a different shape. Whereas children under 6 and 7 maintain that there's either more or less because it looks like there's more or less in the new beaker. Okay. This being able to do the conservation task, according to Piaget, is the ability to maintain consistency even when it looks like things have changed. That the amount of water does not change because it's put in a different shape. It stays the same. And there's another example of this using clay. So you take two equal balls of clay. Are they the same? Yes. You smush one and you ask, well, is there still more or less? And again, children under the ages will look at the now disformed clay and assume there's more or less because it's a different shape instead of understanding the conservation of mass. Okay. So that's that first part, being able to maintain consistency regardless. And this is why we can have Shih Tzus and Pit Bulls in the same category. We can categorize those as the same dog. Okay. The next one is what known as a three mountain task. Um, and so in this, you have this 3D table. You kind of got to imagine that. On one side is Piaget or mom. On the other side is a child. Okay. And the table is set up where there's this medium green one that kind of goes across the table completely. And then there's a tall, slender, dark green, and then there's a wider, a light green one. And at first, Piaget asks, "What does the child see? What do you see?" And the correct response is, well, I first see this wider light green and then the bigger one, and then behind this bigger mountain, there is this tall dark green one. So they'll sequence that in that order. But then Piaget asked this, and this is the experimental question, is he asked the child, what do I see? Okay. Children under the age of 6 or 7 will give their original response. They'd be like, well, you see what I see. You see this one, the table, and then the dark green one, just like me. Duh. Okay. But after the age of 6 and 7, children give the appropriate response. They say, wow, on your left side is that tall dark green one, and then the table one, and then on your other side is the tall green one, the whiter light green one. Now, this may seem like to adults, no duh, but I want you to think about what we're doing when we're doing a task like this. It requires us to pick up the table in our head and mentally rotate it around 300 to 180 degrees to see someone else's perspective. So it requires what's known as mental manipulation. Okay. And Piaget believed it's these tasks that is when a child is transitioning between pre-operational phase to concrete operational phase, where they can take things like a Shih Tzu and a pit bull and put them in the same category. Okay. Now, one of the hallmarks of this age group, though, as Piaget explained, is the term concrete. Okay. Children at this age have very fixed categories for things, very rigid categories. So there's good guys and there's bad guys. There's cops, there's robbers. There's black, there's white. There's women, there's men. And everything is put into categories that don't overlap. They're fixed. And that's kind of the world that kiddos exist in, mainly because dealing with overlapping categories as we develop these schemas and we solidify these schemas, it becomes overwhelming to intermix them and to try and think that, someone is different than another or they're the same. Okay. All right. Then when we get into stage 4 is when we go from concrete thinking to what is known as abstract thinking. And he usually used a paper and pencil test to do this one, to examine that. I don't have an example of it. But the idea behind it, behind abstract thinking, is the idea that a cop can do bad things and a criminal can do good things. Um, that men can act feminine and women can act masculine, and that the categories aren't so fixed, that the world is, quote unquote, a little bit more complex. We don't live in black and white, we live in gray. Okay. And that is stage 4, that he felt was kind of the final phase of development. All right. So let's go ahead and just kind of summarize Piaget's and is it valid? Is it really this? His theory is probably one of the most tested theories. It's one of the few developmental theories that have been tested across cultures. And there's some things, some modifications based on it being tested over and over and over that we need to talk about. Okay. Is one, each of these stages is not better than the next stage. Okay. And this comes from cross-cultural research, in that there are some people, because of the environmental demands, that get to a certain stage, and because they master their environment, that stage is what's best fit for that individual's environment, social situation, and context. And so I'll give an example of the difference between the United States, Germany, and some indigenous tribes that have been tested in the Amazon. So let me put I'm going to put it over the stage they most commonly get to. So Amazon with A usually get to stage two. Um, People in the United States, the majority are in stage three or end in stage three. And individuals who live in Germany, the majority tend to go to stage four. Now, does that make Germans better than Americans and Amazons? The answer from cross-cultural research is no. And let me explain why. You probably have heard in political rhetoric here in the United States that we're the country of laws and rules. Okay. And what you really need to do to survive in the United States, and notice I use the word survive in the United States, is to learn what to do and what not to do. And really, to live in the United States, that's really the only thing you need to survive. Okay. Learning what laws I obey, understanding consequence, action, and that's it. So I can put everything in a fixed category and do quite well. Okay. In Germany, because of the complexity of their history that goes back centuries, but I'll use World War II as an example where the lines between ethics and evil were blurred very heavily. And seeing that there were laws that should have been broken during World War II and World War I and before then, but no one did. Germans in our more modern time require more abstract reasoning because they have been manipulated into in the past to think that a law is a law and you obey it no matter what. Oh, and by the way, that includes killing millions of innocent people. And so that concrete operational phase does not work in that kind of context. So Germany, about 90% of Germans develop the formal operations, the ability to say, abstractly think of whether or not this law or this rule or this way we're doing is right or wrong. Okay. And again, um, uh, by the way, the statistics for the United States is about 85% stay in the concrete operational phase. About 15% develop abstract thinking. Okay. Now, let's go to the Amazon. What is required to survive in the Amazon? Well, you better be able to detect minute differences between plants and fauna and everything else. Because in the Amazon, I'll take a leaf as an example. Two leaves that maybe to us look the same, but to someone in the Amazon, they look the same, but this one has this one's poisonous, this one's not. You also need to know how to get from point A to point B. You need to know all of those things, and you have to have very detailed symbols of the world you exist in. And so this makes the pre-operational phase minus the egocentrism and centration because they're actually much more of a egalitarian society. So we can erase these parts of it. But as far as a cognitive phase, being able to detail the symbols in that world is important. Okay. Now, here's the example of why these stages shouldn't be seen as superior to the others. A person from the United States or Germany can't go to the Amazon and just exist and survive. What do we need to do in being here in the United States or Germany? We have to take a boat, we have to take extra food, we have to take navigation gear, we have to take our modern systems and everything else. And usually we'll also need a guide, usually an Amazon person that exists there as a guide. We couldn't just go exist there. We would probably die pretty quick. Okay. But these individuals expertly live there. Um, and so the idea that one stage is superior of the next through research has been shown to be kind of a myth. That more it's important to develop the cognitive skills that is necessary for a person to survive where they're at, rather than trying to achieve some formal operations, abstract thinking as the ultimate um, existence of human beings. Okay. So I just wanted to bring up that critique. And again, the other critique that we will start looking at next week is the sensory motor phase and infants are is a lot more complex than simply being able to reach out and grab something. So we will get to that as well. Okay. All right. Make sure we got to everything. All right. So this is where we will start on this coming Thursday. Um, but I want to divide them because yeah, oh, never mind. It's strange to try and start this and then pick it up and have it divided. So we will hit on Erickson's psychosocial theory this coming Thursday. But I'm going to stop my sharing